Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Just give me a second to set up the timer, if you don't mind. I'll be starting in three, two, one. So now over here, we'll be talking about major points. First of all, I would like to start by saying that we believe, sorry, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I'm sorry for that. So this house prefers the franchise model to the qualifier model for esport leagues. Now we believe that franchise model is better for the players' recognition and success while maintaining the competitive chance that they have. Now the spectating mechanism will simply work by studying the players and their performance in the leagues or in the tournaments that are performed by the specific video games that are not held by tournaments, or they're not sponsored by any organization. They are just simply tournaments created by the game, special events, and from there, spectators have the ability to spectate those players and their performance. Now, the franchise model is ideal on different levels. We're going to start first by the economic factor and the fairness and the motivation and recognition these players would get. Now, we will explain those in our arguments. Now, the economic factor and the funding in franchise is a lot more sufficient, and there's a lot more fluidity of money coming from the sponsorships and coming from the private organization, which gives the security for those players to be motivated to go on and participate in these tournaments. So they're seeking the best players to earn more and more and have more watch time, which gives them further popularity, and therefore you get more sponsorship. So it's a continuous process where there is more and more fluidity of money, and the economic factor is a lot better, which will come in contrast with when it comes to the qualifying model. Now, this allows young players to work independently and be motivated to earn a higher reputation among the league. Now, having the idea that this reputation gives the player more watch time. Now, the private organization is going to see that and they're going to recognize it. And therefore, when there are more sponsorships coming to the private organization, this allows them to sponsor those young kids and give them even more money and more funding, since they are earning them more watch time. Now, the private sector earns more sponsorship, allowing more funding and flow compared to the qualifying process, which could show a lot of difference and a lot of opportunities when it comes to the young teenagers, which are seeking some sort of reassurance and comfort when it comes to these things. Now, the idea of staying in the same league, which was mentioned in the info slide, gives the idea about these players getting the comfort to be able to compete and don't worry about losing their positions anytime soon, because there are contracts that are involved in these positions, and there isn't much of a corruption value. And in addition to that, that player that is representing the private organization has the idea that these people wanted me for who I am and how good I am. So he has the idea that he knows that he's not going to be simply relegated easily. And when we know that things like these for youngsters and the relationship between their parents, there's a lot of pressure from the parents to ease that idea, and they try to push them a little bit to focus on the academic side rather than video gaming. But having this mentality in the teenagers mentality, it allows them to even develop further and further because they have more trust in the organization. Now, the third argument that we are coming up with is fairness. Now, we said that the policy that we are providing over here, that there will be spectators the same way there are spectators for football looking at the academies. There will be spectators that will watch specific events and tournaments that are simply held by the game itself and no sponsors are involved. And based on that, they will earn And based on that, the selection process is pretty fair. In addition to that, when it comes to these tournaments, now there is going to be a contrast between the qualifier model and the franchise model. Now, the qualifier model, there isn't much funding to the player himself, so he might have lower utilities to be able to play and perform well. But when you have those private organizations funding the players, they provide them with the perfect PC equipment, they provide them with the perfect gear to be able to perform, and they all perform with pretty much the similar specifics for the gear itself, which allows them to be able to compete fairly and have no disadvantages. Now, what opposition might come up and say is that on the other side, it's a lot more fair and that's a lot more transparent, but there are a lot of burdens when it comes to the opposition side. Now, the opposition side will lack the ability that you need to understand that it is the idea of small gaming events. Now, these small gaming events are not necessarily there in all countries, because when you look at the gaming community and you look at the performance of them, they are mainly placed in Europe and America, and a little bit of it is growing up in the Middle East. So what about developing countries? What if there are a lot more players that are a lot better in performance wise than the ones in Europe and the ones in America? So this really burdens the opposition side, and based on that, there is a lot of bias, since there are specific criteria and there are specific requirements for these players to gain the invitation. Now, when it comes to that, you're going to look at the fact that maybe that player doesn't have the specific PC requirements, or that player, since he's independent, he doesn't have the proper funding to go into these major events. So there are a lot of burdens when it comes to that side. In addition to that, some countries don't even have the idea of these small gaming events. So how can someone living in that country, be able to participate in something like this to gain some sort of recognition? And let's say I am in a country that is developing and understanding the idea more. How long will it take for that specific event that is in my region to be recognized by the international further tournaments to finally be accredited for me to be selected to be able to participate? So with the construct that we see over here, we see that private sector has the proper funding and the proper ability to look for the talents, rather than putting criteria and putting further restrictions on teenagers that are just trying to pursue their hobby and what they prefer the most. And thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. We remind you that it is very important to take POIs for engagement. With that being said, we open the debate by calling on the debate in opening opposition by calling on the leader of op. Here.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, so this is leader of opposition. I'm Haruka Sawazaki. If you have any POIs, I'd like to take them on chat, and I have he, him pronouns. Since around the stream, I'd like to turn on my camera too. I'm sorry. Okay, may I start? Then my time begins in 3, 2, 1, start. Two things to argue. Firstly, why franchise model esports leagues are likely to be boring. And secondly, why qualifier league would be better, high-level competition would be better for viewers and also for players. Before that, 2 points of setups. First, about framings. We, the opposition, have to defend qualifier models, which are having successive continuation of tournaments. These things tend to be high level because teams who are in the top level at that moment are going to participate. And this is also progressive because this tournament starts from preliminary round. They have a progressive tournament and people can recognize this is like climax of the tournament. We can know this is a grand final, this is a semifinal. And a lot of people are especially like to view these kind of climax round. On the other hand, government had to defend leagues. Always same teams are fighting each other. For example, in Overwatch leagues, only 10 teams, in Identity 5, only 10 teams are able to participate in these leagues. And during this specific season, which is about half year to 1 year, other players, no matter how they are good at playing these games, cannot access and join into these games. Second analysis to that, I like to analyze how esports are earning money. There are two folds. Firstly, like core fans or like fans or players who are supporting those game leagues or tournaments are going to watch and enjoy those like viewership, they actually go to the stadium and they like buy goods like some like towels or something else. Second scale is that like by having the commercial effect of these esports league, like light users are able to know the existence of like League of Legends or like Valorant, and they can start playing and like drop money into this esports itself. So moving on to our arguments. Firstly, why are franchise model esports league likely to be boring? We have 4 reasons. Firstly, always same teams are actually competing. Whenever you turn on TV and watch leagues of Valorant, always same teams pattern are fighting each other, same members, same tactics. We do understand the core member who always want to analyze tactics would be able to will feel happy through that, but casual fans are likely to leave those viewerships because always people are fighting same time. We don't simply understand how much progress actually leagues are causing. Secondly, because the comparative advantageness would be fixed. Esports, opposed to other stable sport like soccer or shogi or chess, the stability as in sport hasn't been fixed yet, because therefore always one team tend to win and always another team tend to lose. Opposite government might say that esports organization have an incentive to stabilize these kind of relationship between teams, but this is impossible because firstly, because they have a commercial incentive to continuously change the environment. They try to add new maps and new characters. Therefore, it's really hard for them to keep making the environment stable. Secondly, is because they have to have a uniform standard of rules. They can't adjust the game rules only for top level players because beginners or middle class players are also fighting in the exactly same rules. Therefore, they can't adjust the game rule only that is optimized to the top level players. Therefore, these kind of games are highly likely to be unstable and always one teams are winning against another team. This makes it makes it easier for players to expect the result of the games, which make it boring. Thirdly, especially in the latter half of the leagues, typically the ranking of each teams are always being fixed. There's no enjoyment. Even if one team wins against another teams, they're anyway in the bottom of the rankings. Therefore, this does not make enjoyment. This decreases viewership because government cannot ensure the existence of playoffs. Therefore, if teams cannot be in a top position, anyway, nobody would view those teams, and that would not be enjoyable. Moreover, due to the climax does not exist, this decreases popularity. There's less people talking about that leagues. There's less commercial incentives as well. Fourthly, actually professional players are not even strong because, as I already told you, the gaming environment in esports is continuously changing. When another new character, another new map exists, within the hierarchy of who is a strong player always changes. Problem is that in esports leagues, they have to the franchise corporations have to have a contract with specific players for the long term as OG consented. For example, if you decide to be on League of Legends League, you have to be on them for 2 years. Even if you get relatively weak, you have to keep being on it. Therefore, even if you're weak teams, you cannot be released. You have to keep remaining in that league. In some cases, those teams are much weaker than amateur teams, but amateur teams cannot get in. And even if you're weak, you have to keep being on tournament. You're not even strong. We have 3 impacts of this argument. Firstly, this decreases viewership. We told you this is boring and light fans are likely to leave. In our side of the house, people are likely to view the grand final or semi-finals, which would attract a lot of viewers. Moreover, the levels are lower. Even core players who want to learn high-level tactics from these esports leagues are also likely to leave, which means the business model I told you in the beginning is failing, and the state's sustainability of sport is likely to decrease. Secondly, this worsens the labor environment of esports players because as an industry, tournaments are going to be dominated by one specific regional leagues. You other professional gamers do not have any alternative league. You have to choose to belong to that league in order to keep being professional players. Therefore, they have incentive to decrease your payment and working environment, and you don't have alternative. Surely, it's about backlash toward fans. Even if you're weak players, you cannot leave that team due to the long-term contract. If you keep losing, you have to suffer mentally because of backlash or criticisms. And because esports is fragile as your career, if you aren't successful, you should be able to leave that community. This harms players too. Okay, yes, CZ.
An independent group will have a smaller pool of teams to maximize profits by only inviting elite teams, compared to developers who have public pressures to include worldwide teams so that people who play their game get representation for them to profit.
So exactly, I will explain that later, but the qualifier league we support on the other side is not only about one dominant leagues, but a lot of different competent leagues are likely to coexist because they do have a commercial incentive to compete each other, and comparatively weak teams are also likely to be on them. On the comparative, like we think leagues are likely to have really limited number of teams, and this rather hinders accessibilities. So we have two benefits of qualifier leagues. Firstly, for viewers, we can ensure ultimately high-level competition because the strongest team in that in that environment are going to be chosen. Especially this is a competitive tournament, so they will be really competitive. Moreover, like two tournaments have different regulation, different game systems. This makes the stream entirely stimulus. Also, sometimes foreign teams are likely to be visited the guests. This makes the entire like viewer experience really stimulus. We can ensure viewerships. Secondly, even for players, this increases access because at any timing you can be on large competition. Anybody have a possibility to be a worldwide champion. This increases players' motivations because on their side of the house, you are being excluded from the competitiveness. For 1 year or 2 year, you cannot join the league. And the timing to increase your name value, timing to become a professional player is ultimately limited. Lastly, return and reward are increasing because a lot of tournaments are going to compete each other. Therefore, the number of sponsors, the amount of rewards are likely to compete with each other, and they're likely to radically increase. And this is why you both.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to close the debate in opening government, I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister here.
I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So POIs in the chat, please. And I'll start my timer in. Okay. I'll start my timer in 3, 2, 1. Panel, today we're going to be defending franchise over qualifiers. Let's start with some refutations over the weak case that has been provided us by the side opposition. First of all, they talk about the succession of the tournament that is going to be progressive and that we're going to have more and more competition as we progress. I don't see how this is an issue in either of the models because in franchise models, you also have the progression of the tournaments. Leagues do occur and you have simultaneous leagues occurring at the same time, which means that progression of tournaments continues over in outside as well. Not only that, but they mentioned that there are multiple leagues, which means that you're having multiple competitions at the same time. And you can also emphasize that point over on our side as well, because here also we have multiple leagues happening at the same time. Moving forward, they said that the public might get bored and there are same teams. So that means that you're less likely to watch such competitions. However, we believe that this is actually very problematic stance that they have taken because market competition exists on our side. And this is something that I will also prove in my argument. Market competition is something that makes you push forward for competitors, which means that teams are constantly trying their best to become better and better, which means that you will have the best of the best represented in the team, which means that the public will get the elite or quality teams represented over in such leagues, right? Then they say that there are also some commercial incentive and then try to change their maps, and these people, you can say these gamers do not have time to adapt to these maps and they become weaker and weaker. I would like to emphasize on the fact that these are private groups, which means that they're going to invest a large amount of money into these teams, not this the budget breakdown is not only the investment for that person, but also coaches, trainings, and workshops that they require in order to succeed in these tournaments. They're provided all of that because of the private investors, because of the private groups. This is something that they have completely ignored. And so if there's an issue with the game, or if there's a change in the map, it's very, very likely that before competing in any international tournament or national tournament or any kind of league, they're likely to be trained by professionals, by coaches who are going to make sure that they're adapted to the new map as soon as possible before the start of the league. Then they say that the rankings are fixed and that it gets really, really boring. I want to emphasize on the fact that market competition is something that exists on our side, which means that the rankings will definitely change, that you will have a dynamic. That means that there will be one team that will eventually overpower the other, because here we're talking about the best of the best and everyone wants to be the best, so the competition is going to remain, right? Then we're also going to talk more about the fact that the payment is going to decrease as they progress, because if they become very weak, but if the they cannot adapt to the new games, etc. I want to emphasize that this is a contract that they're signing, which means that the payment remains you can say constant throughout the contract, and they can also go for legal suits in case they are not willing to pay, right? So when there's a football competition and when you buy a player, you don't decrease their salary once they start performing low, right? You can't do that because they can take you to court for that. Similar things also exist, or similar models do exist in such esports leagues as well, because we're talking about professional gaming, we're not talking about amateur gaming, right? Now, the main stakeholders, the main point that we are trying to bring forward to you, the gaming society, the public, the gamers, and the gaming developments. Let's talk about the access to funds. As my colleague has already mentioned, that there are a large amount of numbers, there's a large number of people who are willing to invest in these things, right? Why will that be advantageous to us, right? First of all, this means, as mentioned in the info slide, that their teams are not going to be relegated. This means that they are going to be represented. They are going to have a spot in the league, as compared to the other model where you're not guaranteed a spot to compete within that league, right? What will this do? It means that more and more investors are going to invest in this specific league. More and more investors are going to be attracted that, okay, we are similarly going to have some sort of representation when we're going to represent this specific group, right? So this means that the investment is going to increase, the market competition within the investors is going to increase, eventually increasing the value of the gaming society itself. This is something that they have completely overlooked, right? Moving forward to the gamers. So as my colleague already mentioned, and this is sort of like an extension, that because of the market competition that's going to increase, they're going to try their level best to make sure that they are the best of the best, so the buyers can buy them, right? Which means that they are going to be trained really hard. They're going to be attending workshops. They're going to be working, like attending tournaments, etc., in order to make sure that they're the best of the best, so the buyers can buy them, right? Increasing market competition will also mean that more and more gamers can come forward and compete against each other in order to be the best of the best, right? And one of the most important points that the gamers have, or one of the most significant advantage that the gamers have on our side, is the stability of their income and the security, because they know that they're going to get paid and they're going to try their level best to make sure that they are paid. So once they're doing their best and their contract ends with someone, they're going to make sure that they end on a very special note, so other teams can buy them, which means that you're going to have that competition, and that ranking is still going to be there. That enthusiasm, that passion is still going to be there, right? Moving forward to our gamer developers, this is a very important point that we need to take into consideration. If you know that your game is so popular that people are playing leagues for it, like Valorant, like League of Legends, you're going to make sure that your game is the best of the best, which means that you're going to make sure that you can say debugging, you have enough money investments to make sure that all of the issues are fixed, right? Which means that you're going to provide the society with the best possible product, right? And in case something goes wrong, something goes down, you're going to try your level best to fix that, right? So that means that public is going to get the best of the best. The principle of utilitarianism works best in our case, because we're giving the proportionate good, much better good as compared to the other side, where you're not promised any thing of this sort. I'll take the POI.
Yes.
So in a league, once sponsored by teams, they don't have incentive of additional investment because they can anyway gain viewership in leagues. On the qualifier leagues, in order to survive in the tournament, sponsors have a higher incentive.
Okay, yeah. So this is the last point that I was going to, which is the viewership. So this is something that you guys have created a very big issue out of, and I don't see why this issue exists on our side. So when we're talking about the best of the best being streamed, when you know that Messi is going to be playing against Ronaldo, that match is going to have the most viewership. You know that this match is going to be the one that's going to be really popular. Why isn't that same case applied over here, where you're going to have the best of the best being played against each other, which means that you're going to make sure that the teams are performing their best, hence increasing the number of watchers, increasing the number of contests, increasing the number of people who are going to buy that game in order to work out the similar strategies that they have seen on the game, right? Increasing their streams, increasing their views, eventually leading to more and more production, more and more, you can say, profit, making the society more and more, you can say, utilitarianism relevant, right? So here we're talking about specific people who are best of the best, and they're going to make sure that the private investors are definitely going to make sure that they're you can say that the games are being watched, right? Hence we're proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to close the debate in the opening half, I call upon the deputy leader of the opposition. Here.
Can I be heard and seen?
Yeah, both.
Okay. So as for POI preference, I like to take POI via chat. If I couldn't notice a voice coming, please vocalize yourself and say POI. I like to take at least one along 4 to 6, especially one is coming from closing. So my time begin in 3, 2, 1 now. 3 things from Deputy. First of all, clarifying what the crucial Dota in this debate. Second of all, dealing with the economical factor, which is the most important clash in this in the opening debate. Lastly, talking about why opening opposition win the whole debate. Before moving on, a couple of individual response to what the opening government has said. Two individual response. One, they talk about the fairness because they use like different systems or different machine. One, on the level of machine, we say like in the single tournament, we say even in outside the house, we use the players use the same machine or the same like game system, which is like the given and provided by the host of the tournament. But second, we say like in terms of cheating, which the opening government has also said because there'll be the OG Assad, there'll be less cheating in their side of the house because there'll be more people who are watching the game. We actually think this has no logical link between two things because like even if there are more people who are watching the game, we are able to find something cheating underground on there. There's no logical link from the opening government. But third, they also say how it's unfair for some people to have different like rules in the different tournament. We actually this will actually make the like variety of the league, variety of tournament in outside house, which will make the fun and stimulating tournament. Because in their side house, there'll be only like always one team is winning, and we think that's a crucial problem in the opening government. But second, they also talk about how the people in the players in rural areas are not able to access any kind of the tournament in the outside house. Couple lessons. One, they talked about we say like these people, especially in terms of esports, are able to join online because in many like esports tournament, people are able to join in online, especially in our tournament, which only have in the short term, like in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, they are able to adjust time zone and able to join even in the overseas tournament, like this world. But second, we actually especially the top players who are like in the rank in the world, like the first or second. We're seeing these people are like invited, financially supported by the host of the tournament in outside the house because as my partner has already told you, we are seeing this will. Anyway, not a problematic in outside house. But third, most importantly, we say they have to talk about the counterfunction and be comparative in the outside house, especially in developing countries. It's not have enough like internet connection or this industry. We actually the players in developing countries do not have any kind of access to join their regional leagues, which they have to defend. They have to be comparative. We actually see even the players in developing countries are able to join to some extent in outside house. This will be way better in the outside house. Before we go if closing.
Yeah, correct. You said that these people don't have internet access, but at the same time, you want the highest number of like quality in your team. This only happens when these people have access to internet. On our side, we have a wider variety of teams. On your side, you only allow the big teams to compete because you need the profit for your independent actors.
We're actually seeing even if small teams, if these teams are actually strong, they're able to join anyway. But also, we say that there are different variety of standards to join the tournament. We're actually there even novice teams, like rookie team, are also able to join in certain tournament. In your side of the house, the excluded people were always excluded in your side. That's the crucial delta. Moving on to the clarification. There was only one clarification about the sponsoring or coaching. We say like this will also be mutually excluded. This will like not mutually excluded. This will also having in outside the house, especially in outside the house. Individuals are able to like decide the sponsor or coaching by themselves because they are like they're mainly working individually, or even if they are working with the other team, they're able to able to choose by themselves. This means if they are not good at the tournament result, they are able to change the coach, like the tennis player doing so. We actually think this will be way better for efficient coaching. Moving on to the econ factor, which is the most important issue. OG said more private fund will come in to invite good players. We actually think full response on this. One, simply is not true. Once each private group buy a team, they have no risk of losing a spot as in InfoSlide. This already means they do not have any financial incentive to get any improvement. Even if they are at the bottom team every season, companies can get certain amount of money, like for example, viewership of the like regional TVs. We actually think they have no financial incentive. We actually think looking at, for example, the baseball leagues in some tournaments, we actually some teams don't have any kind of improvement every season. But second, we say the regional league cannot invite top player in the world because it has long time season, like only for the whole year. You have different time zone and fans to not know them that much. This means there is no incentive for foreign players to join minor regional league. Like the US top player will never join in the Zimbabwe the minor tournament. But sad, rather in the opposition side, for a couple of reasons, more investment will be done, as my partner has mostly told you. Each qualified league has to compete against other league in outside house. So prize money get higher, less joining fee. There'll be more a warm welcoming competition. In that house, regional league has no rival in that religion. And only that religion viewer will look at your religion league. There will be no improvement pressure to that league. B, it's short term. As I told you, foreign guests will be possible, adjust time zone by online. There'll be nothing in that side house. C, in terms of scale of the viewership, we win. In light for the players who do not much have interest, we say there will be the certain climax, like the grand final or semi-final, there'll be more viewership, no response from the opening government. But second, the core people who look at the high level round in outside house, high level competition round, also no response from opening government. But fourth, most importantly, we say in outside house, they'll be trickle down on players, because that if they want to invite the top players, they have to give a lot of money to these players to actually come into their tournament, because the players have a lot of options in outside house. In their side, there's no option for the players just to contract with the same league for the whole player life in their side house. That already means even if there is more viewership, even if we take at best from the opening government, unless regional league, the sponsor will be able to get more money from the regional viewership, which is actually not true. They are able to stock that money for the whole company. They will not given any single money to trickle down to the player, because there will be no risk to lose that player from that tournament. Because even if that player leave from that league, there will be no other option to actually contract with other players. This only means that there will be no trickle down in any way at best. Lastly, why opening option takes this way? One, we say the econ issue which we opening option takes is the most important issue in this space, because econ the esports league is it's a new industry which has to be sustained, which has to make a new the business model. They need more viewership, which we take. But second, even if there will be some sustainability, some stability in their side. We actually think this is bad, because one, they have to endure with a backlash from the fan, but also they have to endure with the worst the working environment. That's why we take the whole debate.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to open the debate in the closing half, I call upon the member of government. Here.
Hi, sorry, just making sure I'm audible and visible.
Both.
Okay, thank you so much. I will take my I'll take my POI at about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'll queue one from opening if possible. So if you could have a POI prepared, that'd be great. If not, closing works too. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, opening half was admittedly confusing at best, because both teams claim to have some preliminary competition to claim this large benefit of a larger pool of players, right? CG will uniquely break this deadlock and take this debate. We'll tell you why the variety of teams in our franchise model is going to be larger for 4 structural reasons. First, by virtue of just the higher number of teams in the higher number of tournaments in their model, right? This means that teams can only decide to hit certain tournaments insofar as there's 10 or 12 random tournaments split out through the entire year. Teams can't afford to hit every tournament. Means they'll pick and choose which tournaments to go to. Means the amount of teams in a tournament will inevitably be smaller. It's quite intuitive. Second, division of audiences time between watching so many tournaments means that tournaments will have to be smaller to captivate audiences, to have a smaller pool of players to keep people interested. Second reason. OO claims that small teams can make it if they're good. First, we tell you the franchise model has mandatory regional qualifiers that cater specifically to these nations without the internet, as OO wants to claim. This also is a concession from OO that only the fringe 1% of smaller teams are able to make it on their side, whereas on our side, it's mandatory to give these teams a chance. Next, we tell you profit incentives of both independent actors or game developers. And this is extremely important, right? Because independent actors can only make money based off views, which means they'll only prioritize major high-quality tournaments. They'll only invite the best of teams to watch the best of the best go against people, to get those clickbait titles. So, oh, look how good our tournament is. Look how elite our teams are. This is the only way in which these people can make profit. We tell you on our side, game developers make money by people playing the game. game. This means that they uniquely want to cater to a larger amount of people by having a more diverse preliminary tournament. And they'll also be likely to be more influenced by public pressures to be more inclusive. They get more people playing the game. That's how they make their money. That's a unique distinction which grants us a larger amount of pool of teams on our side. Ops benefit of higher competition quality can only manifest with a smaller pool of teams, and that is intuitive. So their case is unstrategic when they try to claim that they have a larger amount of teams, but also a higher amount of competition. It doesn't really make sense. Regardless, we'll give OO what they want and we'll say, like, sure, tournaments on their side of a higher quality. Panel, we take this debate when we show you how our benefits manifest to minorities and how it benefits esports players as a whole. Why we outweigh OG? OG's impact is people will get more training and become better at the sport, and the sport grows and becomes more competitive. We tell you that since sports is a zero-sum game and there's only one real winner, we see this like increase in talent as having like a neutral impact since there's only one winner at the end of the day. We also feel that the increase in competitiveness kind of mitigates the income stability argument because so many people become so much better at the game now. It's kind of a strategic. OO's impact is that games are protected. We don't see how contract abuses as a substantial harm, and we don't know why this should hold so much weight. My rebuttals to OO are integrated into my speech. Therefore, two arguments to posit today, panel. First, why we uniquely galvanize growth within these underrepresented regions and give opportunities to racial minorities. And second, how we maximize the quality of life for esports players by advancing esports as a whole. First, why we galvanize growth within underrepresented regions. The problem in status quo is that pro esports players are generally concentrated in specific regions, but also demographics. This looks like Japan, the West, Korea, and men in general. This is because there's a lack of investment into esports infrastructures within the region. This looks like a lack of high quality tournaments, lack of advertising for people on the ground that sees gamers as gaming being a viable option to them. How we fix this incentive is that we give people a larger stake in their team. They want their region to win. It's likely they want to undertake these investments cost to maximize the chance of their team winning. They also make sure they can actually find those who are talented or skilled. Understand now that they would know they need to unlock the silent gamers or silent demographics. OG told you why that these people will receive more training. We tell you we are the side which uniquely sorts out these players, gives these players a chance to become good. We're not just giving good players the chance, we are making good players, and that's why we take them and way above them. What does this look like? This looks like advertising to the female audience, encouraging upcoming gamers with cheaper tournaments, female-only tournaments to encourage participants. So why is this exclusive to us? The comparative is on their side. There's a lack of incentive for these private actors to fund these underdeveloped regions and demographics as you do not profit that much off it. Even on their side, their small tournaments have no incentive to go out and build and find talents to unlock their demographics because all they want is their elite teams. And the impact is just underrepresented demographics. Second argument then, about how we maximize the quality of life for esports players. Before I move on, I'd like to take a PY from opening.
Why do corporations have incentive to invest on players who are currently not standing out? Even without those things, they are able to pick up players who are already talented.
No worries. We tell you simply for the fact that because you give these teams an opportunity to shine, we're not saying that the game developers will suddenly fund these teams. We're saying private actors will now fund these teams the moment in which they're given an opportunity to shine. And that's what's different on our side. You don't give these teams a platform to play on. That's why no one will eventually sort them out. On our side, people sort out these talents for the sake of them having an actual chance at play. Second argument then about how we maximize the quality of life for esports players. What's the problem with Qualifier Model? 5 reasons. First, the time to watch tournaments will be small. This looks like the time and interest being divisible, interest being split among a large number of tournaments, even if they have an extremely elite tournament, we tell you why this is bad. Second reason, people lose interest relatively quickly. Even if the teams perform really badly, right, by virtue of supporting them, people will stay and watch. This means as long as teams constantly rotate, there's no familiarity on their side and people lose interest. On our side, we give people a chance to root for. Third reason, most importantly, about how oversaturation of media. This takes OO at their best, where tournaments are so high level, right? We tell you that content is taken in on a scale. You can only recognize good quality content when you have bad quality content. You recognize good matches when they are bad matches. We point you to the Super Cup in sports. We point to you rivalry matches in football and like other sports being so unique because they don't happen every time. The moment in which you allow these things to happen day by day, month by month, that is the point in which people lose interest, even taking them at their best, that this quality of sports is so high. Then we tell you that there's also a lack of an interesting narrative on their side because the tournaments are extremely elite and the tournament is going to be very niche. Next, we tell that there's less gratification of winning local tournaments because smaller tournaments in their world mean absolutely nothing. People don't recognize it. The prize pool is also smaller. On our side, we give you this one main tournament organized by the big game developers. Imagine winning WUDC against winning some random Asians major. It's so much better to win a tournament that's recognized by the world as being the best tournament that you can attend. How do we fix this? The best actor in the game is the developer itself because not everyone who plays the game watches. There's only one main tournament. We also ensure that teams are not relegated and rotated. We ensure familiarity and connections being made, and this is responding to the profit mechanization on on their side, because now people can actually sell things like mice that make like a lot of money because people understand them. We ensure media is not oversaturated. This looks like the Netflix model failing, people getting tired of having so much content at once, meaning that even if like we buy all their tournaments of higher quality, that means nothing when people are disinterested. Why is this exclusive to us, and what are our impacts? In the qualifying model, the amount of tournaments means that time is divisible. There's a first mover's advantage and people will be disinterested. We are the only side that maintains a pull on these people to watch the sports. We're the only side that grants these winners emotional gratification. We're the only side that grants financial stability for esports players when people are attracted. We are the only side that increases the pay and bargaining power for esports players to live better lives. So proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to open the debate in the closing opposition, I call upon the member of UP, here.
I'm audible, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay, starting in a second. Okay, so starting in 3, 2, 1. I think there is one gigantic distinction that has to be made. Accessibility to resources for you to train and to become good at esports, and accessibility to tournaments and to win tournaments. Why is this distinction important? Because in the gaming world, it's not hard to get good. Firstly, the people that get scouted are the ones on top of the EU rankings, for example, in League of Legends. Secondly, the sport is massively decentralized. There is an immense amount of resources online, courses, YouTube videos, Twitch streams that teach you how to play, and it's very accessible for you to play because it's free in the vast majority of cases. Thirdly, it doesn't require physical infrastructure and training. That is to say, you need only a cheap PC that doesn't lag much, and there is an incentive in the computer industry to provide that, considering gaming has been massively on the rise. Massively on the rise means a lot of demand, which means they want to cater to that niche and to make it accessible as much as possible for people to train. The biggest issue with accessibility is that certain centralized organizations are massively stigmatizing towards certain minorities and especially towards women. And this is going to be like all of our extensions. Now, onto inaccessibility. The general thing that I just want to say, a centralized organization is massively discriminatory towards small teams. Small teams often have correlate with women or other minorities that are trying to break in, or they're structurally and straight up sexist towards women teams and women players in male-dominated teams. Why is this likely to be the case? A lot of mechanisms. Firstly, they have to recognize that franchises inherently means that you have to buy your spot. That is to say, you either directly have to buy your spot. This is like what happens with League of Legends. Or secondly, you have to apply public pressure to be recognized by the league as a team that is very popular, which means asymmetrically, the teams that have the most capital, the most money to advertise themselves are the ones that are able to break in and to sustain their influence. The second thing is that at the point at which you're a centralized organization, this means you're more risk-averse and conservative. You want to maximize your profits and you retain the same teams in comparison to trying to experiment and including other teams that haven't emerged yet, or especially other demographics, for example, women. The third thing that I'll just generally say, on their side, they have less tournaments. I think this is just straight up intuitive. If you have strict regulations and you have a single central authority, you want everything to be a huge tournament, right? You don't have on the comparative small teams of enthusiasts and passionate people who are organizing smaller scale tournaments. But secondly, if you are a franchise, this actively means that you want less teams in order to build historical narratives around it. For example, TCM is finding the unicorns or whatever was the team of that League of Legends team, which means structurally speaking, you want less teams. But finally, you want the same things over and over within the same tournaments because you want to build rivalries. You want to build something that you can advertise on social media in order to actively galvanize people. And finally, you want to maximize your profits. Often those teams have established fan bases that are buying merch, that are actively following that, which means structurally speaking, the teams that are on the top remain on the top. This is massively inaccessible. So why is this now inaccessible specifically towards women? 3 reasons. Firstly, in the vast majority of cases, by virtue of the info site, if you happen to read it, those are private actors who are not passionate about meritocracy. They care about maximizing their profits. Something that is very intuitive with sponsors and people that want to maximize their profits is that they cater to demographics. The video game industry has been massively sexist towards women. It has been historically advertised as such, which means they will cater basically to the male gaze and to the male desire, which actively means that they are gatekeeping and not allowing for women to participate in in those sports because they want to maximize their profits. Secondly, the already established teams don't have an incentive to change and include women, considering they have been historically dominated by males. This looks like inconsistent, or this may anger and may appear to be very woke or very progressive, which many gamers who are on the borderline of being right-wing is something that they don't like. And thirdly, and I think this is like straight up intuitive, a centralized organization has people on top. Those people have spent the most time in those organizations. They have been most entrenched by the toxic culture of the 90s and the 2000s that has been directly related to sexism. And those are the ones that are like to be the oldest, because there's a clear correlation with them being sexist. The bottom line of this is, this, or like their model, inherently disincentivizes and gates away small teams, and which means that they may consist of women, or they directly discriminate against women. Why is our model comparatively better? 3 reasons. Firstly, different organizations exist. By virtue of that, we have competition between different organizations that wish to maximize meritocracy, and they wish to be as accessible as possible. Secondly, organizations by enthusiasts that don't want to maximize their profit, they just want to run good tournaments, actively exist. Or thirdly, organizations may emerge that are more progressive and aren't as scandalous. On the comparative, if you have a scandalous and centralized organizations, you want to tone it down with marketing in order to ensure that your image isn't hurt. Secondly, we have a clear criteria, that is to say meritocracy. The rules may fluctuate, we are fine with that, but overall, it is your basic performance against other teams. Your win rate, how many people you have shot in the head, I don't know how Overwatch or League of Legends work, which actively means that it is more meritocratic. That is to say, you have a lesser of a capacity to actively discriminate against teams on the basis of sexism. They aren't established enough because you cannot sidestep this. And thirdly, if it does happen, we have a higher capacity to have legitimate backlash in which you are pointing out that you have a huge success, but yet you are being discriminated. Before I continue, I'll take a point.
Profit maximizing tournaments on your side can't make money off women tournaments with low views because people are sexist. On our side, at least game developers are able to be pressured by the community of women who play.
We don't care about money if I have proven that gaming is accessible. We care about structurally changing organization in a way that allows for women to participate to begin with. Why is this impactful? First, it allows for a more critical mass of women to participate within those specific sports. That is to say, a critical mass of people that are actually watching this, or a critical mass of women that actually succeed, which can carve out the toxic masculine culture, which can actively change narratives, and which can actively spark discussion and talk about their specific lived experiences. The second thing that is massively important is that now esports, especially after it has exploded due to COVID and social isolation, has a huge platform, which means those women are uniquely in the position, if they succeed and they're comparatively doing better, to inspire other women and to empower them to participate within esports. And the third thing, which nobody talks about in this debate, this is not just a debate about people that are watching esports. It's about every single person in this world that casually plays games. Those people are victims on an everyday basis to the toxic culture in the video chat in which they are, to the toxic Twitch streams, to the toxic YouTube streams. At the point at which we actively break the myth that women are inferior in sports because they're now going to be beating all the male ones. But secondly, at the point at which they're professionally successful, this actively breaks stereotypes and over the long term allows for less discrimination of women, even if they're casually gaming. This reduces the stigmatization of so many people. For all those reasons, proud to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now to close the debate inside government, I call upon the government whip. Here.
Hello, can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Hello to those watching, I guess, if there's anybody watching. Okay, for you guys in the chat, wait 1 second. My mouth isn't working. Okay, starting my speech in 3, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I'll start off my speech talking about why closing opposition is out of this debate in its entirety. The first thing they say is it's not hard to get good. I think maybe this can apply to a certain extent to open government because their whole case was about, we can make these gamers become better. But Jaden already told you why we think that is something that is value neutral within this debate. Because why do we care about gamers getting better insofar as other gamers get better? It's not like you get this specific group of gamers to win. This is an act of motion where we care specifically about some gamers that OG arbitrarily makes reference to. We don't see why that is even strategic in this debate. There is nothing so I don't think that applies to us. But the second thing is they say big leagues don't want women. What are the reasons that they gave you for this? They say they want the teams that are the most popular. I think this contradicts with their own analysis, because you understand that these leagues and these people who are regional officers, let me put it, want their team to win. That is to say, they want the same profit, they have the same profit incentive that they talked about later in their speech from coming from closing opposition. That is to say that you want those who are the strongest within your region to win these tournaments. You want them to go within these leagues. I don't see how suddenly you want people who are popular insofar as these specific regions want their region to win because they make money when their region wins. I think that's fairly intuitive. I don't know why you like disengage with your own analysis there. But then they talk the demographic is bad, so people are bad and people don't want to change. Here, I don't know why you care about this more in profit. That's the first layer of analysis here. Because insofar as these are private firms, what they should care about is making the most money. And insofar as them winning this league makes them the most money, I would think that that's what they care about. But the second layer here is that understand that on your side, these women are simply not going to be the strongest team because there is no infrastructure in place for them. You never engage with Jaden's analysis as to why these private firms would want to come and bring up these women programmers and women, like I'll just say athletes here within the industry, because then you're able to get the most out of your own region. CO thinks, and OO as well in their POI, thinks that we are saying that private firms suddenly care for women and they care for like breaking the patriarchy. We don't base our analysis off that panel. We say that they know probably, because these are rational people who are working within the industry and want to make sure they make the most money. They are probably thinking that, our skills are probably arbitrarily distributed within society. That is to say, they are likely going to be women who are just as good as men. The reason in which why they cannot succeed is because of the same toxic cultures that you talk about on CO. It is also because of the same, like they just don't feel as if this is a place for them. The point at which firms are going to be able to, they have the capacity in which to like advertise things like that and make women's only tournaments. Why is it within their own incentive as per the profit incentive that they give you for closing opposition? Because insofar as they want the absolute best of individuals, and like, you know, if everybody can get good, there must be some role of your actual innate skill that comes into play in the long run. That is to say, you want to make sure you get the absolute best people from the get-go. That is to say, you want this thing to be as accessible as possible, because that is the only time where you get the people who are the best of the best from this region. Just this also engages with later in their speech when they talk about accessibility and that being something of a net good in and of itself. Because we say that the point at which you get these private firms to say, this region, I need to make someone here a winner. You want to make it so that you can check through everyone. You want to make it as reflective of the population as possible. The point at which they have that incentive to make it accessible, I don't see the arguments of CO manifesting. If anything, we flip it, and that is actually the case that came out from Jaden's speech. They talk about smaller tournaments being about meritocracy. I feel there's no reason to believe why they would suddenly think differently as per your analysis. But I think it's already preempted within Jaden's speech when they talk about who is going to make the first move. Because why would they suddenly want to cater to this smaller audience when they know that as per the analysis from closing opposition, this is a lesser demographic for them to cater to. But also, I think the actual problem that's categorically different on closing opposition here is that they can say like, oh, women can just go somewhere else, so we are not the whole problem. The point at which the league is the major institution within this industry, and the point at which there is, as you can see, social backlash within these movements saying like, oh, why aren't you having women inside this? Why aren't you encouraging women? Why are you okay with this toxic culture? All that backlash is going to be concentrated at the league in and of itself. That is to say, they have a strong incentive to change what they are doing because they can't shift blame as you can do from the smaller majors on your side. We say that is a harm that we avoid in and of itself. And Jaden tells you in the POI that, you know, small tournaments won't make money if exactly what I said. But I think that the capacity analysis that they give you, like, oh, they can have these female tournaments, means nothing insofar as it never proved to you any form of incentive analysis. That is, say, why would they act in that way? Insofar as we give you why this profit analysis is going to translate into an incentive to make it as accessible as possible, we are the only side that gave you that. Opposition whip can do that. We beat closing opposition out of this debate. Why is our case, and why is when it's proven it wins us a debate? Firstly, we talk about underrepresented groups. This means that we are on the side that helps in terms of OO's metrics of accessibility, which like gets more people into the sport and like more money, however it is they want to talk about, but primarily accessibility, and OG's metric of growing the game, which is kind of similar. And CG also talking about helping underrepresented group, but also engages on the auxiliary crash. That is that the gamers are better off in and of itself. And even CO tried to get this in the late part of the speech saying like, oh, gamers are better, less toxic cultures there. But we tell you it's because the preliminary games on our side is going to be more fair due to public pressures on these game developers, because they are the main source of all these things. They are the main source of all this backlash hitting them and them alone, but also why private actors have a higher incentive to improve higher incentive and capacity to improve the game for people on the ground. I don't think we should buy OO's claims of like, oh, the maps are going to change, or the rules are going to change. I think all of these games, if you have played a game, you know that they change over time and they evolve over time, and people are happy with that. They don't want to play the exact same game over and over. These games are tweaked over time to make sure it's best for people and it's the most fair. I don't see why suddenly that is going to be something that people are going to be against. But before I wait over the two opening teams, I'll take OO.
So I told you because the environment is changing, new character, new maps are being added. even if one specific team are popular and strong at the timing that leagues are made, in the long run, they are no longer strong, they're no longer attractive, and the leagues are gonna be boring. This is a loose claim.
Okay, so the thing you talk about is the same teams again and again. This is boring, blah, blah. I think at the point at which you see like people want to have allegiances to this team, we give you actually 4 reasons as to why it's going to be likely that people actually like the things on our side. The first being allegiances, that people want to be part of this team. Like, I love this team, even though they are losing for a few years. This is my team. That's how people work in football as well. Like, I love Chelsea, even though they lose again and again. We talk about oversaturation on your side, insofar as these games are going to be so constant throughout the year. We're not going to be like, this is the time in which I'm going to sit with my friends and watch the game, because the game happens like every weekend. We also talk about narratives. When you have these same groups, you're going to have some sort of narrative. Some people are like, these are the underdogs, those kinds of things. Same thing with allegiances. But the gratification that comes, it just feeds into overs analysis, because they say, when you have tournaments with you, you can see you can win, so you want to make money. When the money is more, you want to do it more. I don't see why it doesn't work on our side. So weighing against OG, I think OG is out insofar as it's like value neutral to this. I think the last thing to talk about is OO. OO is the same team always, game changing rules, these kinds of things. All of these things we see is constantly changing. It just makes sense. Like, we want these things to change over time. It's something that is good. We don't see why these things are net harm. But also they talk about local tournaments better for people on the ground and autonomy of choosing who is your sponsor. The principle here is accessibility and capacity are goods in and of itself. On accessibility, insofar as CG is the one that proves to you that we unlock these demographics, we win on their metric. And on autonomy, you need to understand that if you care about people's autonomy, you care about accessibility in and of itself. That is to say, you can't make decisions if you can't access the industry. On our side, when we allow most people access into this industry, this looks like unlocking demographics through systems of private incentives that we are taking on our side and co-opting on our side. We are the side in which that wins this debate, because we help the people who are the most harmed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now, to end the debate in the opposition side and the debate as a whole, I call upon the up whip here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Cool. PY's in chat. I'll take one from opening at 5, and I'll begin in just. Okay, so starting in 3, 2, 1. Honestly, the reason why I was able to get somewhat good in debating is because I had access to online tournaments during the pandemic. It was because I could afford to go to those tournaments and actively compete against people who are better than me, see what they do, and then apply it to my own strategy. It's the same thing with gaming. The thing is, it's quite accessible to get good and to be able to qualify for those tournaments, right? You just need a computer and just to watch a few streams and play for hours, which I'm not sure is that good for you, but I guess do you. But the point is, if you want to do this, you can. The thing is that you have to be able to access those tournaments for a few specific things for you to get actually good, for example, to be able to do this for a living, or necessarily just be able to do what you love on a higher level and get the validation that you did this. Because most people got into gaming to relax, to get out of reality, to be able to get the validation that they can try to get good at something and to prove that they're not useless, right? Many people of this do this to relax and just be able to do this, which means to the point at which you have more access to tournaments, it's necessarily better for you because you're better able to have the validation that you are getting good, because you can see your progress, but also because you actually can compete with others and see how you do. Now, let's engage with teams. First, with our openings. I think what we have a similar line of analysis, which is that same teams are recruited every year, which means that there's just it's inaccessible to different minorities that want to compete. The problem is that never give the structural reasons that we did as to why you actually recruit the same teams, right? They do not give you the risk reverse analysis to why the organizations are quite risk reverse and don't want to do something too new because they do not know what the outcome is. They do not give you the analysis to why the boards are very conservative people, because most of them are quite old, which means that they do have older values that are from the toxic coaches of beforehand. 30, they do not give you the analysis of the famous competitiveness between teams, or also because you have to buy your spot in those franchises. I want to illustrate this in the most intuitive way. League of Legends has like 5 regions and 10 teams every single year. I'm not sure how this allows for many people to have access to this, and why you're better able as an unrepresented team to buy yourself in where you probably don't have as much funding as they do. This is something that they never prove to you that they necessarily have to have in order for their case to function. But secondly, they just don't prove the extent to which why is it important to have such representation, right? We prove to you why necessarily, even if it's not only women but other minorities, having access to this actually betters their life, not only to make them feel good, but actively break down some stereotypes context, this is all impacted within this their speech. Second thing, I think they're just argument about boring games and the quality of the games getting lower is quite contested within this debate. I'm not sure they give the best responses to this, right? They say that the quality of the game will get bad, but presumably you try to make this better to the point at which it gets bad. I'm not sure why this is the most important thing within this debate. Now, let's look at the OG. Firstly, they say this: you have more money within the game because you have those private entities sponsoring different people, which means that they're better able to train. Firstly, they never impact as to why you need more funding for like training to get good. They never prove to you what's the difference of having like a normal PC and then the newest one that has like all the extra features. I'm not necessarily sure why this is necessary for you to get good. But secondly, even if you do this, they do not prove to you incentives of people to do this. Why would you sponsor a risky investment if you're not sure what the outcome is? On the comparative though, you don't necessarily have to do this because this is not the only way you can access those tournaments. If you have different competitions at many different levels, on regionals, on city levels, such like this, it means that you're better able to firstly make connections that will get like throughout time get you better, right? You can probably like some investor will go there and at some game, and because you have been training at tournaments a lot, you can get better. But secondly, there's unique training you can do at tournaments. You can not only like on the competitive environment, it's different how you game as opposed to when you're at home, which means it's uniquely benefit that you get only from going to tournaments. But also the fact that you are better able to like be seen by other people at some point allows you to have this representation. So we beat them on their own metric. But secondly, they say they also try to bring this point in the PM about representation, how different countries from developing nations are not being able to compete, and then this now they can. Firstly, no mechanism as to why like this is the case. I'm not sure why you have the incentive as a league, which note the league has limited resources to organize tournaments, right? They cannot do this quite often, which means that because there's only one entity organizing those tournaments, when you have less of them, there's just a lesser like likelihood of you recruiting those people, which means that they are not able to prove their point on representation. We on the other side comparatively flip this, right? Because we prove why you have new organizations that have more progressive leaderships that actively, for example, have more just altruistic incentives as opposed to just profit, because you just have different people. You also have different industries competing with one another as opposed to just one league that has no competition within the game. OG, go.
How is esports different from other sports like football, which follows basically the same franchise concept and has a consistent fan base for over the past few years?
There's just many different tournaments you can play football in, not only one organized, because the sport is not concentrated within this one league. No one has ownership over football. Like this is the difference, because you can only play League of Legends tournaments when it is organized by League of Legends. On your side of the house, where comparatively you can do this differently. CG, do you have a question?
Yeah, when it's easy for everyone to get good, the threshold to become the best becomes extremely high. This means that those with better infrastructure has the highest chance of success. You lock out poor minorities when you only have elite teams in private tournaments to maximize view and profits.
No, this is not true, because if more people can get good, this is something good, right? Presumably, even by OO's metric about the quality of the game getting better, we maybe would like this. But the point is, you have access to more people getting better, which is better, right? On the weighing part, one, we impact more people in the terms of more people have access to the presumable benefits of gaming, as all teams here agree. Secondly, you're just better able in the long term to have access to other people playing, such as women, who are never confident enough to get into the gaming industry because they felt that this is something that they should not be doing. But once you were able to see a representation, like some woman winning a tournament, something like this, which has never happened before, you're better able to get into this. Now on CG, I think a lot of the thing was integrated with OG because they have similar points. But firstly, they say profit is something that makes you get like women because you want the best of the best. No, they never respond to the analysis given by Bisser as to why you won't do this, even if it's bad for you, right? People are irrational. If they have, for example, different incentives, such as that they're sexist, they will not care for this. They will presume that the woman will just be worse. But even if it's not that radical, we gave you very realistic analysis to firstly, you were scared how your fan base will react if you have a woman on your team. Because, for example, your like a fan base is just kind of more conservative men that they're more so isolated. Than this is not to generalize, just to say that sometimes it's likely to be the case. Secondly, they do not they don't respond. But even if you give active analysis, I believe this is not true, because most likely you don't know what will happen, therefore you don't want to make the risk of the investment. Secondly, they say you have backlash against the league. No like analysis to why this is likely to happen. And even if it is one, it's very hard to hold the league accountable because there are no clear metrics as to how you recruit someone. Comparatively, this is better on our side, because if someone wins a lot and they're not recruited, you can actively say, hey, why are you doing this? Which is better on our side. Thirdly, though, they say there are too many gays in you, like people will dilute. I just think people will choose comparatively what they want to watch. Not sure why the big impact here is that big. The comparativist, you have more access to tournaments, which makes you good, allows people to see you, get sponsors, and actively break those stereotypes. Vote us.
Thank you very much for that speech, and thank you all for the debate. Please leave the breakout room while we deliberate, and we'll call you back shortly.
Thank you so much for the debate.